The rain came down hard that Thursday evening, turning the streets into rivers of blurred headlights and rushing water. Inside Betty's diner on 5th Street, things were quieter than usual. Just a handful of customers scattered across the worn red booths, the kind that had seen better days about 20 years ago. Lisa stood behind the counter, one hand pressed against her lower back, trying to ease the constant ache that had become her companion over the past few months. 7 months pregnant, and her feet felt like they were carrying the weight of the whole world. The black non-slip shoes she wore to work had lost their cushioning somewhere around month 5, but buying new ones wasn't in the budget. Not when every dollar mattered now more than ever. She caught her reflection in the chrome of the coffee machine. Dark circles under her eyes, hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. The same tired expression she'd been wearing for weeks. At 26 years old, she never imagined this would be her life. The nursing program she'd been accepted to sat on hold indefinitely. The apartment she'd shared with her boyfriend was now just hers, along with all the bills that came with it. He'd left 3 months ago when she told him about the baby, said he wasn't ready to be a father, and she hadn't heard from him since. The bell above the door chimed, pulling her from her thoughts. A man walked in, shaking water droplets from his expensive-looking coat. Lisa noticed him right away, not because he was particularly tall or striking, but because he looked completely out of place. His suit probably cost more than she made in 3 months. The watch on his wrist caught the fluorescent light, the kind of timepiece you only saw in magazine ads. His hair had touches of gray at the temples, and he carried himself with the kind of quiet confidence that came from never having to worry about whether his card would decline at the grocery store. She grabbed a menu and walked over, her practiced smile appearing automatically. "Evening, sir. Just one tonight?" He looked up at her, and for a moment his eyes flickered to her pregnant belly before meeting her gaze. "Yes, just me. Anywhere is fine. Take your pick. We're not exactly packed tonight." She gestured around the nearly empty diner. He chose a booth by the window, the one that looked out onto the rainy street. Lisa handed him the menu and pulled out her notepad. "Can I start you with something to drink?" "Coffee, please, black." His voice was measured, calm. He studied the menu while she went to pour his coffee. Her co-worker Danny was in the back, scrolling through his phone instead of refilling the ketchup bottles like he was supposed to. "Got a fancy one out there," Lisa said, grabbing the coffee pot. "Looks like he could buy this whole place with his pocket change." Danny glanced through the service window. "Rich people always come in here when they want to feel normal or whatever." "Take his order, smile pretty, maybe he'll leave a good tip." Lisa didn't respond. She'd learned not to expect much from anyone anymore. People surprised you, usually in disappointing ways. She brought the coffee to the man's table, notepad ready. "What can I get for you?" "The turkey club, please. And a side of fries." He closed the menu and handed it back to her. "Thank you." His politeness struck her as genuine, not the fake kind some people used when they wanted something. She wrote down his order and headed to the kitchen. Through the window, she could see him looking outside, watching the rain. There was something about the way he sat there, completely still, like he was thinking about something important. While she waited for his order, Lisa wiped down the counter and refilled sugar dispensers. The routine kept her hands busy, and her mind from wandering to all the things she didn't want to think about, like how she'd need to buy diapers and formula soon, like how her savings account was getting dangerously low, like how her landlord had been making comments about selling the building. The kitchen bell dinged. She picked up the plate and brought it to the man's table. "Turkey club with fries. Anything else I can get you?" "This is perfect, thank you." He paused. "Busy night?" She laughed, a short, tired sound. "You can see it's not. Thursdays are usually slow and the rain doesn't help." He nodded, glancing toward the window again. Lisa followed his gaze and saw old Robert standing outside, his jacket pulled tight against the rain. Robert was there most nights, a homeless man who'd been living on these streets for as long as she'd been working at Betty's. "Does he come around often?" the man asked, his tone curious rather than judgmental. Lisa shifted her weight from one aching foot to the other. "Robert? Yeah, most evenings. He's harmless. Sometimes I give him whatever's left over before we throw it out." She lowered her voice. "My manager doesn't really like it, but what's the harm? Food's just going in the trash anyway." The man looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Interest, maybe. Or surprise. "That's kind of you," she shrugged. "It's just food. Nobody should go hungry when we're throwing stuff away." Your manager really minds? He says it encourages loitering or whatever. But Robert doesn't bother anyone. He just exists. That shouldn't be a crime. She realized she was saying more than she usually did to customers. Sorry, I'll let you eat. No need to apologize. It's a valid perspective. Lisa headed back to the counter, suddenly self-conscious about opening up like that. She didn't know this man. For all she knew, he could be the type to complain to management about employees who fed homeless people. But something about him made her feel like he was actually listening, not just making polite conversation. The next 20 minutes passed quietly. The man ate his meal without rushing, occasionally looking at his phone but mostly just sitting peacefully. Lisa helped a couple at another table, refilled coffee for a regular who came in every Thursday like clockwork, and tried not to think about how much her back hurt. When the man finished, she brought the check. He pulled out a leather wallet, the kind that probably had more cards than she'd owned in her entire life, and handed her cash. Keep the change, she looked at the bills. He'd given her enough to cover the meal with a standard tip, nothing more, nothing less. Somehow that felt more honest than the pity tips some people left when they noticed her pregnant belly. Thank you, sir. Have a good evening. He stood, gathering his coat and briefcase. That's when Lisa noticed he'd left the briefcase on the seat. Sir, wait! You forgot. But he was already walking toward the restroom, apparently not hearing her over the sound of the jukebox someone had started playing. Lisa looked at the expensive leather briefcase sitting there. She could see Danny watching from the kitchen, and she knew what he was thinking. The same thing anyone would think when a rich guy leaves behind something valuable in a rundown diner. Danny came out, wiping his hands on his apron. He'll be back for it, Lisa said firmly before he could say anything. I'm just saying, people like that, they have insurance for everything. Probably has 3 more briefcases at home. Doesn't matter what he has. It's not ours. Danny held up his hands. Fine, fine. Just saying, you could probably use a break, you know? Baby's coming soon. Lisa felt a flash of anger, hot and sudden. I'm not stealing from customers, Danny, drop it. She stayed by the booth, keeping an eye on the briefcase until the man returned. When he came back and saw her standing there, something crossed his face quick as lightning. Was that surprise, approval? She couldn't tell. Thank you for watching it, he said, picking up the briefcase. Of course. Have a good night. He nodded and walked toward the door. Just before he left, he paused and turned back. What's your name? Lisa? Well, Lisa, I hope things get easier for you. And then he was gone, disappearing into the rainy night. She stood there for a moment, wondering about that strange interaction. Then the couple at table 6 needed their check, and Danny burned someone's order and the dishwasher started making that weird grinding noise again. Life at Betty's diner continued, and Lisa had no idea that the man in the expensive suit had just changed everything. Lisa didn't think much about the man in the expensive suit after that night. She had bigger things to worry about, like the letter that arrived on Saturday morning, slipped under her apartment door in a crisp white envelope. Her landlord was selling the building. All tenants had 30 days to find new arrangements. She read the letter 3 times, sitting on her second-hand couch, trying to make the words say something different. They didn't. 30 days. She was 7 months pregnant, working at a diner that barely gave her enough hours, and now she had to find a new place to live in one of the most expensive cities in the country. The panic came in waves. She let herself feel it for exactly 5 minutes, watching the clock on her microwave. Then she folded the letter, put it in a drawer, and got ready for her evening shift. Falling apart wasn't an option, not when she had a baby depending on her. Work that night was busier than usual. Some local college had a game, and Betty's diner filled up with families and students. Lisa moved from table to table, forcing smiles, taking orders, bringing food. Her feet screamed with every step. The baby had been kicking all day, pressing against her ribs in a way that made it hard to breathe deeply. You okay? Rita, the other evening waitress, asked during a brief lull. Rita was in her 50s, had been working at Betty's for almost 15 years. She'd seen it all. Just tired, Lisa said, which was true but not the whole truth. Rita gave her a look that said she wasn't buying it, but she didn't push. Table 9 needs ketchup when you get a second. The dinner rush finally died down around 8:30. Lisa was wiping down the counter when Danny came out of the back, his phone in his hand and a strange expression on his face. Did you hear about Betty's? He asked. Lisa's stomach dropped. What about it? The owner's shutting us down. Couldn't keep up with the rent increases. We've got 2 weeks, then they're closing for good. The world tilted slightly. Lisa gripped the counter to steady herself. 2 weeks? That's what I heard. He's supposed to tell everyone officially tomorrow, but my cousin knows his accountant. Danny shook his head. This place has been barely hanging on for a while now. Guess it finally caught up. Lisa nodded, not trusting herself to speak. She finished her shift on autopilot, going through the motions while her mind raced. No apartment, no job. Less than 2 months until the baby came. The math didn't work. No matter how many times she tried to calculate it in her head, the numbers just didn't add up. She counted her tips that night in her car before driving home. $43. She had $847 in her savings account. That was it. That was everything standing between her and complete disaster. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of failed apartment viewings and job applications. Every landlord wanted first month, last month, and a security deposit. Even the cheapest places she could find wanted money she didn't have. The few that might have worked wouldn't rent to someone unemployed, and the ones that didn't care about employment were in neighborhoods where she wouldn't feel safe. She applied to 12 different restaurants and diners. 3 never called back. 5 said they'd already filled the position. 4 said they'd keep her resume on file, which was code for no. Nobody wanted to hire someone who'd need maternity leave in a few weeks. Her last day at Betty's was a Wednesday. The owner gave everyone their final paychecks and a handshake. No severance, no bonus, just a thanks for your service, and that was it. Lisa cleaned out her locker, said goodbye to Rita and the other staff she'd worked with for 2 years, and walked out into the afternoon sunshine feeling completely untethered. That night, she slept in her car for the first time. Her apartment was officially gone, her stuff in a storage unit that ate up $120 she couldn't afford to spend. But it was either that or lose everything she owned. The car was a 2008 Honda with a broken air conditioner and a passenger door that only opened from the outside. But it was paid off and it ran. That made it more valuable than gold right now. She'd chosen a parking spot at Memorial Hospital, figuring hospital parking lots were safe. Security guards, cameras, lights. Lots of cars coming and going at all hours, so one more wouldn't stand out. She'd pushed the passenger seat all the way back and tried to get comfortable, which was impossible when you were 7.5 months pregnant. Sleep came in fits and starts. Every sound made her jump. Every pair of headlights sweeping across the car made her duck down. She'd never felt more vulnerable, more exposed, more completely alone. Morning came gray and cold. Lisa washed her face in the hospital's public restroom, changed her shirt, and tried to make herself look presentable. She had a job interview at 10. A coffee shop on the north side was looking for morning shift help. She'd lied on the application, said she wasn't pregnant, wore her baggiest sweater and hoped they wouldn't notice they noticed. The manager took one look at her and said they'd call if anything opened up. They wouldn't call. By the end of the week, Lisa had developed a routine. She'd spend her days at the public library, using the free Wi-Fi to search for jobs and apartments. The bathrooms were clean and nobody bothered her if she sat quietly in the corner. When the library closed, she'd buy something cheap from a dollar menu, make it last as long as possible, then drive back to the hospital parking lot. She moved spots every few nights, rotating between 3 different hospitals. Didn't want security to recognize her car and start asking questions. Some nights she parked at 24-hour grocery stores. Once she tried a rest stop, but the noise from the highway made sleep impossible. Her phone became her lifeline and her enemy. Every morning she'd check for messages, emails, anything that might be good news. Every morning brought nothing but spam and credit card offers. The battery was dying faster now, and she couldn't always find places to charge it. She started rationing her usage, only turning it on a few times a day. 2 weeks into living in her car, Lisa sat in a park eating a granola bar for lunch, watching mothers push strollers and chase toddlers. She tried to picture herself doing that, but the image wouldn't come. All she could see was the inside of her Honda, the parking lots, the fear that lived in her chest now like a permanent resident. She'd thought about calling her mom, back in Ohio. They hadn't spoken in 3 years, not since Lisa had moved away against her mother's wishes. Pride was a funny thing. It kept your back straight and your chin up, but it also kept you isolated when you needed help most. That afternoon, sitting in the library, she finally broke down. Not loud, not dramatic. just quiet tears sliding down her face while she stared at her laptop screen. A woman at the next table pretended not to notice, which Lisa appreciated. She was 8 months pregnant now. The baby kicked constantly as if aware of the stress, trying to remind Lisa that she wasn't really alone. That made it worse somehow. She wasn't failing just herself anymore. She was failing this tiny person who hadn't even been born yet, who hadn't asked for any of this. The cramps started that evening while she was washing up in a gas station bathroom. Small at first, easy to ignore. By midnight, they were impossible to ignore. By 2 a.m, she knew something was wrong. She drove herself to Memorial Hospital, the same one where she'd been parking, her hands shaking on the steering wheel. The emergency room was bright and loud and overwhelming. A nurse took one look at her and rushed her back. Lisa tried to explain that she didn't have insurance, that she couldn't pay. But the contractions were coming faster now and nobody seemed to care about money. "You're in early labor," a doctor told her, after what felt like hours of monitoring and questions. "We're going to keep you here, try to stop it. The baby needs more time." Lisa nodded, unable to speak past the fear closing her throat. A nurse with kind eyes held her hand and asked if there was anyone they could call. Lisa shook her head. There was no one. Just her and the baby in this sterile hospital room that smelled like antiseptic and floor cleaner. They managed to stop the contractions. 3 days later, Lisa gave birth to a healthy baby girl, 5 weeks early but strong. She had dark hair and tiny, perfect fingers, and she cried with surprising force for someone so small. Lisa held her daughter and felt love so fierce it physically hurt. She also felt terror. Because now what? Now what was she supposed to do? Where were they supposed to go? The hospital social worker had already been by, talking about shelters and assistance programs, her voice carefully neutral. On the 4th day, while Lisa was trying to figure out how to nurse the baby without crying from exhaustion and stress, there was a knock on her hospital room door. She looked up expecting another nurse or maybe the social worker again. Instead, she saw him, the man from the diner, the one with the expensive suit and the briefcase. He stood in her doorway looking exactly the same as he had that rainy Thursday night, except now he was holding a folder and wearing an expression she couldn't read. "Hello, Lisa," he said quietly. "My name is Richard. I think we need to talk." Lisa stared at the man in her doorway, her exhausted brain struggling to make sense of what she was seeing. Richard? He'd said his name was Richard. The man from Betty's diner from that rainy Thursday night weeks ago. What was he doing here? How did he even know she was here? "I'm sorry," she said, her voice rough from crying and lack of sleep. "Do I know you?" "We met briefly, at the diner where you worked." He stayed in the doorway, not coming in like he understood that his presence was confusing and maybe a little frightening. "May I come in? I promise I'm not here to cause any trouble. Actually, I'm here to help if you'll let me explain." The baby made a small sound in her arms and Lisa instinctively pulled her closer. Every protective instinct she had was screaming at her to be careful, to not trust this situation. Rich men didn't just show up in hospital rooms to help struggling waitresses. That wasn't how the world worked, but she was also desperate, and there was something in his eyes that didn't seem threatening. Just sad, maybe, or tired in the way people get when they've seen too much of the world's harsh edges. "Okay," she said finally. "But I'm going to call the nurse if anything feels weird." "Fair enough." He stepped inside and closed the door softly behind him. He didn't sit down, didn't make himself comfortable, just stood there holding that folder, looking almost as uncomfortable as she felt. "I owe you an explanation, and it's going to sound strange. But I need you to hear me out." Lisa nodded, shifting the baby to her other arm. Her daughter had fallen back asleep, tiny face peaceful and unaware of how complicated everything was. "That night at the diner," Richard began, "I wasn't there by accident. I go to places like that sometimes. Ordinary places where people are just living their lives. I watch how they treat others, how they act when they think no one important is looking. Why?" The question came out sharper than she intended. "Because I'm looking for something specific." "Someone specific," he paused. "I run a large company. Multiple companies, actually. And I've learned that the people who look good on paper, who have all the right degrees and references, they're not always the ones with real character. Character shows up in small moments, in how someone treats a homeless man standing in the rain, in what someone does when they find a briefcase full of valuable things and no one would know if something went missing. Lisa's heart started beating faster. The briefcase. You left it on purpose. I did. He didn't look apologetic. I know how that sounds. Like some kind of test, which is exactly what it was. I needed to know what you'd do. That's messed up, Lisa said flatly. Testing people like that without their knowledge. You're right. It is, Richard met her eyes. But it's also effective. People can lie in interviews. They can pretend to be someone they're not when they know they're being evaluated. But when they think no one's watching, that's when you see who they really are. And what did you see? She wasn't sure she wanted to know, but she asked anyway. I saw someone who feeds hungry people even when her boss disapproves. Someone who refuses to steal even when she's clearly struggling and no one would blame her. Someone who stays kind even when life hasn't been kind to her. He shifted the folder to his other hand. I saw someone with integrity. Real integrity. Not the kind people perform. Lisa felt tears threatening again. She was so tired of crying. Okay, so you saw all that. That still doesn't explain why you're here in my hospital room. How did you even find me? I had someone keeping track of you, he admitted. I know how that sounds too. But after that night at the diner, I wanted to see more. To understand if what I'd witnessed was a fluke or if it was really who you are. So I had a private investigator follow up. Not in an invasive way, he added quickly, seeing her expression. Just checking in occasionally. Making sure you were all right. So you knew. The words came out barely above a whisper. You knew I lost my apartment. You knew I lost my job. You knew I was sleeping in my car. The anger started building, hot and fierce despite her exhaustion. And you did nothing? You just watched? Yes, he didn't try to defend himself. And that's the part that probably makes me seem heartless. But I needed to see something else. I needed to see how you'd handle rock bottom. Whether you'd compromise your values when you were desperate. Whether you'd stay the person I thought you were. That's cruel, Lisa said, and the baby stirred at the emotion in her voice. It is, Richard agreed. My wife used to say the same thing about my methods. She passed away 2 years ago. And before she did, she made me promise something. She made me promise to find people worth helping and actually help them. Not just throw money at problems, but really invest in people who deserved a chance. He finally moved, pulling a chair closer and sitting down, but still keeping a respectful distance. But she also taught me to be careful, to make sure I was helping people who would use that help to build something real, not just people who were good at asking for handouts. She believed character matters more than circumstances. Lisa didn't say anything. She just held her daughter and waited for him to continue. I watched you refuse to look in that briefcase even when your coworker encouraged you. I watched you lose everything and not once did you lash out at others or blame the world. You could have easily walked out of that diner with something valuable when I forgot my briefcase. You could have made up excuses about why it would be justified. You didn't. He leaned forward slightly. Even at your lowest point, sleeping in your car, you didn't lose who you are. That's rare, Lisa. That's incredibly rare. So what happens now? Lisa asked, afraid to hope, afraid to trust this. You show up and tell me I passed some secret test? That I won some prize for suffering with dignity? Not a prize. An opportunity. He opened the folder and pulled out some papers. I run a foundation. It's dedicated to helping people who've fallen on hard times through no fault of their own. People who have integrity but just need a break. We provide job placement, housing assistance, education support, whatever's needed. Lisa looked at the papers but didn't take them. You're offering me charity. I'm offering you a job, Richard corrected. Director of Community Outreach for the foundation. It pays $95,000 a year with full benefits. Health insurance, dental, vision, childcare stipend. And I've already secured you an apartment near the office, furnished. First 3 months covered while you get settled. The numbers didn't make sense. They were too big, too impossible. Why would you give me a job like that? I was a waitress. I don't have a degree. I don't have experience running anything. You have something better than a degree, Richard said. You understand struggle from the inside. You know what it's like to be desperate and scared and still choose to do the right thing. The people we help through the foundation, they need someone who gets it. Someone who's been there. Someone who won't judge them or look down on them. This is crazy, Lisa whispered. Probably, he agreed. But that doesn't make it less real. He set the papers on the table beside her bed. I've also paid your hospital bill, all of it. And there's a trust fund set up for your daughter. For college or whatever she needs when she's older. You can't touch it, but she'll have it when the time comes. Lisa felt like the room was spinning. I don't understand. Why me? Out of everyone in the world, why me? Richard was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was rough with emotion. Because 10 years ago I had a daughter. She was working her way through college as a waitress. Doing everything right. Working hard, staying kind despite how tough things were. She died in a car accident on her way home from a late shift. Drunk driver ran a red light. I'm so sorry, Lisa said automatically. She was a lot like you, Richard continued. Same determination. Same kindness. After she died, I spent years just being angry. Angry at the world, at fate, at everything. My wife finally told me I needed to channel that anger into something useful. She said we should find people like our daughter and give them the opportunities she never got to have. We started the foundation together, but she got sick before we could really get it running properly. He stood up, pushing the chair back. So that's why you, Lisa. Because you remind me of what the world lost when my daughter died. And maybe helping you is selfish in a way. Maybe it helps me as much as it helps you. But the offer is real, and it's yours if you want it. Lisa looked down at her sleeping baby, then at the papers on the table, then back at Richard. A day ago she'd been terrified about where she'd go when they discharged her from the hospital. Now someone was offering her not just a way out, but a way forward. A real future. What if I'm not good at it? She asked. The job, I mean. What if I fail? Then you fail and we figure out something else, Richard said simply. But I don't think you will. I've been watching you for weeks, remember? You don't give up. You don't quit. And you care about people. That's 90% of what this job needs. Wait, can I think about it? Even as she asked, she knew what her answer would be. But she needed a minute to process, to make sure this was real and not some exhaustion-induced hallucination. Take all the time you need, Richard said. Though the apartment is ready now, and you're being discharged tomorrow, so practically speaking, sooner is better than later. He pulled out a business card and set it next to the papers. My direct number. Call me when you've decided. He walked to the door, then paused and turned back. Lisa? What you did, staying honest and kind when you had every reason not to be, that matters. Never let anyone tell you it doesn't. Then he was gone, and Lisa was alone with her daughter and a folder full of papers that promised to change everything. She sat there in the quiet hospital room, holding her baby close, and for the first time in months, she let herself believe that maybe things could actually be okay, maybe even better than okay. 6 months had passed since that surreal conversation in the hospital room. 6 months since Lisa had called Richard's number with shaking hands and said yes to an opportunity that still sometimes felt like a dream. Now she stood in her office on the 7th floor of the foundation building, looking out at the city below, and tried to remember what it felt like to sleep in her car. The apartment Richard had arranged turned out to be more than just a place to stay. It was a real home. 2 bedrooms, a kitchen with actual counter space, windows that let in morning light. The furniture was simple but comfortable. Nothing fancy, nothing that screamed charity case. Just a normal apartment where she could build a normal life. The job had been terrifying at first. Lisa had walked into that first day convinced everyone would see through her, would realize she was just a waitress pretending to be someone important. But Richard had paired her with Helen, a woman who'd been running non-profit programs for 20 years. Helen didn't coddle her or talk down to her. She just taught her the ropes, showed her how things worked, and trusted her to figure out the rest. You'll make mistakes, Helen had told her that first week. Everyone does. The question isn't whether you'll mess up, it's whether you'll learn from it and do better next time. Lisa had made plenty of mistakes. She'd approved funding for a program that turned out to be poorly managed. She'd hired someone who looked great on paper but couldn't actually connect with the people they were supposed to help. She'd overspent the quarterly budget by $8,000 because she hadn't understood how to read the spreadsheet properly. But she'd also done things right. She'd created a program that helped single mothers get job training while providing free childcare. She'd partnered with 3 local restaurants to hire people who were transitioning out of homelessness. She'd set up an emergency fund that could get families into apartments when they needed first and last month's rent, but had nowhere else to turn. The best part was the people. Every day, Lisa met someone who reminded her of herself 6 months ago. Scared, desperate, trying so hard to keep it together, and now she got to be the person who said, I see you, I understand, and I'm going to help. Her daughter, Mia, was thriving. She'd hit every milestone early, as if making up for being born 5 weeks premature. The daycare at the foundation building was better than anything Lisa could have afforded on her own. The staff there loved Mia, and Lisa could visit during lunch breaks to nurse and hold her. Richard checked in regularly, but he didn't hover. He'd show up to quarterly board meetings, review the foundation's work, and occasionally stop by Lisa's office to ask how things were going. He treated her like a professional, not like a charity project. That mattered more than he probably knew. Today was different, though. Today, Richard had called an all-staff meeting, and there was something in his voice that made Lisa nervous. The conference room filled up with the foundation's 23 employees. Lisa sat near the front, next to David, who ran the job placement program, and Kelly, who handled the housing assistance applications. They'd become friends over the past months, grabbing lunch together, venting about difficult cases, celebrating the victories. Richard walked in looking tired. More tired than usual. He set his briefcase down and stood at the front of the room, not bothering with the podium or presentation screen. "Thank you all for coming," he started. "I'll get right to it. I've been diagnosed with stage 3 pancreatic cancer. Treatment starts next week and the prognosis is uncertain. I'm telling you this because it affects the foundation, and you all deserve to know what's happening." The room went completely silent. Lisa felt her stomach drop. Around her, people were exchanging shocked glances, some covering their mouths, others just staring. "The foundation will continue operating normally," Richard continued, his voice steady despite the bombshell he'd just dropped. "I've made arrangements to ensure funding continues regardless of my health situation. The board of directors will handle oversight, and I've appointed Helen as interim executive director." Helen, sitting in the back row, looked as shocked as everyone else. "But there's something else I need to address." Richard's eyes found Lisa in the crowd. "I need to tell you all something about how this foundation started, and specifically about how Lisa came to work here." Lisa's heart started pounding. She hadn't told anyone the full story of how Richard had found her. Most people assumed she'd applied for the job like anyone else. 6 months ago, I met Lisa when she was working as a waitress. She didn't know it, but I was testing her, watching how she treated people, how she made choices when she thought no one important was looking. He paused. "I do this sometimes. I go to ordinary places and observe people looking for certain qualities: character, integrity, compassion under pressure." Lisa could feel eyes turning toward her. Her face burned with embarrassment and confusion about where this was going. I watched Lisa refuse to steal from me when she had every opportunity and every reason to do so. I watched her lose her home and her job and end up living in her car while 8 months pregnant. And I did nothing to help. His voice cracked slightly. I waited. I watched her hit rock bottom because I needed to see if she'd stay who she was even when everything fell apart. The room was so quiet, Lisa could hear the ventilation system humming. "That was cruel," Richard said, his eyes still on Lisa. "It was a test she never asked to take, and the cost of that test was her suffering. I've justified it to myself by saying it was necessary, that I needed to be sure. But the truth is, it was cruel, and Lisa deserves to hear me say that publicly." He turned to address the whole room again. "I'm telling you this because I want you all to understand something important. Lisa isn't here because I felt sorry for her. She's here because she demonstrated more strength and character in her worst moments than most people show in their best. She earned this position. She's earned everything she's accomplished here over the past 6 months." Richard looked back at Lisa. "And I need to apologize to you in front of everyone. I'm sorry for the test. I'm sorry for watching you struggle and not stepping in sooner. You deserved better than that." Lisa didn't know what to say. Part of her was angry that he'd shared her story without asking permission. Part of her was still processing the cancer diagnosis. And part of her understood, maybe for the first time, that Richard's actions had come from a place of pain and loss, not cruelty. "I forgave you for that a long time ago," she said finally, her voice quiet but clear. "When you told me about your daughter, I understood why you did it. I didn't like it, but I understood." "That doesn't make it right," Richard said. "No," Lisa agreed. "But it makes it human." After the meeting, people approached Lisa with a mix of sympathy and newfound respect. Some apologized for assuming she'd gotten the job through connections or luck. Others shared their own stories of struggle, creating an unexpected bonding moment. Helen pulled Lisa aside as people were filtering out. "Did you know he was sick?" "No," Lisa said. "Did you?" "Not until today." Helen shook her head. "He's stubborn. Probably didn't want anyone making a fuss." That evening, after everyone had left and the building had grown quiet, Lisa went to Richard's office. The door was open and he was sitting at his desk, staring at nothing in particular. "Can I come in?" she asked. Of course, Lisa sat down across from him, Mia asleep in her carrier. "You didn't have to tell everyone my story." "I did," Richard said, "because you're going to need them on your side for what comes next." "What do you mean?" "I mean, I'm making you the permanent executive director," Richard said. "Helen is interim because she's experienced and the board will accept that. But I want you to take over. Really take over. Not just as a figurehead, but as the person making decisions." Lisa laughed, a short, disbelieving sound. "Richard, I've been here 6 months. I barely know what I'm doing most days." "You know exactly what you're doing," he countered. "You understand these programs from the inside. You know what people need because you've needed it yourself. Helen can teach you the administrative side. The board can handle the politics. But the heart of this foundation? That needs someone who's lived it. What if I fail? Then you'll figure out how to fix it," Richard said. The same thing he'd told her in the hospital. "But you won't fail. I watched you survive the impossible. Running a foundation will be hard, but it won't be impossible." Lisa looked at Mia, sleeping peacefully, completely unaware that her mother's life was about to change again. 6 months ago, she'd been terrified about where they'd sleep. Now she was being asked to run an organization that helped thousands of people. "Okay," she said. "I'll try. That's all anyone can do," Richard said. He looked older than he had that morning, the weight of the diagnosis showing now that he didn't have to perform strength for a room full of employees. "Lisa, I need to know something. That test I put you through, watching you struggle, do you really forgive me for that?" She thought about it, really thought about it. "I hated you for it when you first told me. I spent weeks being angry every time I thought about it. You could have helped me sooner. You could have saved me from sleeping in my car, from being terrified every single day. I know. But here's the thing," Lisa continued. "If you just offered me a job that night at the diner, I probably would have said no. I would have thought it was pity or charity or some kind of trick. I wouldn't have believed I deserved it." She paused. "Going through all that, hitting bottom and climbing back up, it changed something in me. It made me believe I could survive anything. And that belief? That's what makes me think I might actually be able to do this job you're asking me to do." Richard's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "My daughter would have liked you. I wish I could have met her," Lisa said honestly. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, two people who'd been brought together by loss and testing and an unconventional path to trust. Outside, the city lights were coming on, thousands of windows glowing in the growing darkness. Somewhere out there, Lisa knew, were people sleeping in cars, losing their homes, wondering how they'd make it through. And tomorrow, she'd come back to this office and try to help them, not because someone was testing her, not to prove anything to anyone, but because she knew exactly how it felt to be desperate and scared and still trying to hold on to who you were. That understanding, earned through suffering, was worth more than any degree or credential. Richard had been right about that, even if his methods had been questionable. Character revealed itself in the dark moments, and Lisa had learned finally what her character was made of. 18 months later, Lisa sat in the executive director's chair that still didn't quite feel like hers. Even though her name was on the door and her decisions shaped the foundation's direction, Mia was almost 2 now, babbling in full sentences and running everywhere instead of walking. The trust fund Richard had set up for her sat untouched in an account Lisa checked occasionally, still not quite believing it was real. Richard had made it through treatment. Against odds that hadn't been in his favor, the cancer had gone into remission. He looked thinner now, moved a little slower, but his mind was as sharp as ever. He'd stepped back from day-to-day operations like he'd promised, letting Lisa lead while serving as an advisor when she needed guidance. The foundation had grown. They'd helped over 300 families in the past year alone. The programs Lisa had developed were being noticed by other organizations, and she'd been invited to speak at conferences about innovative approaches to breaking cycles of poverty. Every time someone introduced her with her credentials and accomplishments, she had to resist the urge to say, "I was sleeping in my car 2 years ago." But today wasn't about conferences or programs or statistics. Today was about going back to where it all started. Lisa pulled her car into the parking lot of Betty's Diner, except it wasn't Betty's anymore. The sign had been replaced, the windows were clean, and through the glass she could see new booths and fresh paint. The building had been bought by new owners 6 months ago, renovated, and reopened as Rosie's family restaurant. She got Mia out of her car seat and walked to the entrance, her heart beating faster than it should. She hadn't been back here since her last shift, since the day the old owner had handed out final paychecks and locked the doors for good. Inside, the smell of coffee and bacon was the same even if everything else looked different. The layout was similar enough that Lisa could picture where the old counter had been, where she'd stood exhausted and pregnant, trying to smile through the pain in her feet. "Can I help you?" A young woman approached, maybe 22 or 23, wearing a server's apron and a name tag that said Jen. "I'm actually looking for someone," Lisa said. "Rita, does she still work here?" Jen's face lit up. "Rita? Yeah, she's in the back. Let me grab her." She disappeared through the kitchen doors. A moment later, Rita emerged, looking exactly the same as Lisa remembered. Maybe a few more gray hairs, but the same kind eyes, the same no-nonsense expression. She stopped short when she saw Lisa. "Oh my God," Rita said. "Lisa. Hi, Rita." They hugged, careful of Mia between them. Rita pulled back and looked at the toddler. "This is her? The baby? This is Mia." Lisa felt tears threatening, the good kind this time. "She's almost 2. Look at you," Rita said, her voice thick with emotion. "Look at both of you. You look healthy, happy." "I am," Lisa said simply. "Can you take a break?" "I want to tell you something." They sat in a booth by the window, the same one where Richard had sat that rainy Thursday night. Rita held Mia on her lap, letting the toddler play with her bracelet while Lisa talked. She told Rita everything. The apartment loss, the job loss, living in her car, the early labor, the hospital, Richard's appearance, and his impossible offer. "I wanted to call you," Lisa admitted, "when everything was falling apart, but I was ashamed. I didn't want anyone to know how bad things had gotten." "Pride's a beast," Rita said, understanding in her voice. "But you made it through." "I did. And now I run the foundation that helped me." "We've helped hundreds of people, Rita. People just like I was. People who are good and decent and just need one break." Rita shook her head in amazement. "I always knew you were special. The way you treated people, even when you were drowning yourself. That matters." "That's actually why I'm here," Lisa said. "I want to offer you something." She pulled out a folder similar to the one Richard had shown her in the hospital. "The foundation is expanding. We're creating a new program specifically for service industry workers. People who work in restaurants, retail, places where they're on their feet all day for low pay and no benefits." "About time someone thought of that," Rita muttered. "We're going to provide emergency grants, job training if they want to transition to something else, childcare assistance, healthcare navigation, all the things that would have saved me from living in my car." Lisa opened the folder. "And I need someone to run it. Someone who understands the industry from the inside. Someone who knows these people aren't lazy or looking for handouts. They're just trying to survive in a system that makes it almost impossible." Rita looked at the papers, then at Lisa. "You're offering me a job? Program director. $65,000 a year, full benefits. You'd be working directly with restaurants and their employees, identifying people who need help, making sure our resources get to them." Lisa paused. "Rita, you've been waiting tables for 15 years. You know everyone in this industry. You know who's struggling, who's one emergency away from disaster. You're perfect for this." "I'm 53 years old," Rita said. "I don't have a college degree. I've never worked in an office." "Neither did I when Richard hired me," Lisa pointed out. "You have something better than a degree. You have experience and compassion and common sense. That's what this job needs." Rita was quiet for a long moment, looking out the window at the parking lot. "I watched you those last few weeks at Betty's," she said finally. "I knew something was wrong, but you never said anything. Never asked for help. I wish I'd pushed harder." "It wouldn't have mattered," Lisa said gently. "I wasn't ready to accept help. I had to hit bottom first." "Is that what this is?" Rita asked. "You paying it forward?" "Maybe," Lisa admitted. "Or maybe I just know you'd be amazing at this job and I'd be stupid not to ask you." Mia had fallen asleep against Rita's shoulder, her small body completely trusting. Rita looked down at her and smiled. "She looks like you." "Poor kid," Lisa joked. "I'll do it," Rita said. "I'll take the job, but on one condition." "What's that?" "You teach me everything you know. I'm not too proud to admit I'll need help figuring this out." "Deal," Lisa said. "That's exactly what Helen did for me." They sat there a while longer talking about the details, about start dates and training, and all the practical things that came with a new beginning. Other customers came and went. Jen brought them coffee without being asked, sensing somehow that this conversation was important. When it was time to leave, Rita walked them to the door. "Lisa, can I ask you something?" "Of course. That man, Richard. The one who tested you. Are you really okay with what he did? Watching you suffer like that?" Lisa thought about it. The same question she'd asked herself 100 times. I'm okay with where it led. The suffering was real and it was awful. But it taught me something I needed to learn. That I'm stronger than I thought. That I can survive anything. She adjusted Mia in her arms, and it put me in a position where I can help other people not have to suffer as long as I did. That's a generous way to look at it. Maybe, Lisa said. Or maybe I just learned that holding on to anger doesn't help anyone. Richard made mistakes. So have I. The question isn't whether we mess up, it's what we do after. That evening, Lisa met Richard at his office. He was packing up for the day, moving slower than he used to, but steady. "I hired Rita," she told him, "for the new service workers program." "The waitress from Betty's?" Richard asked. "The same one," he smiled. "Did you test her first?" "Absolutely not," Lisa said firmly. "I offered her a job because I know she's qualified and I trust her. No games, no secret evaluations. Just a straightforward offer to someone who deserves a chance." "Better than my approach," Richard acknowledged. "Much better," Lisa agreed, but she was smiling when she said it. Richard leaned against his desk. "You know what my daughter's name was?" Lisa realized he'd never told her. "What was it?" "Elizabeth. We called her Beth." His voice was soft with memory. She wanted to be a teacher. She was working her way through school, taking night classes while waitressing during the day. She never complained, never asked us for money even though we had plenty. She wanted to do it herself. She sounds like she was remarkable. "She was," Richard said, "and watching you these past 2 years, seeing what you've built, how you've helped people. It's been like getting to see who Beth might have become if she'd had the chance." Lisa didn't know what to say to that, so she just stood there letting him have the moment. "Thank you," Richard said finally, "for taking a chance on a strange offer from a man in a hospital room. For forgiving my methods even when they were questionable. For becoming exactly the person I hoped you'd be. Thank you for seeing something in me when I couldn't see it myself," Lisa replied. They stood in comfortable silence, two people connected by loss and hope and an unconventional path to redemption. Outside, the city hummed with its evening rhythm. Somewhere out there, Lisa knew, was another person sleeping in their car, another single parent wondering how they'd make it through. Another server on their feet all day, one emergency away from disaster. But now there was a foundation ready to help. Programs designed by someone who understood because she'd lived it.